name is Dana Baxter. I'm an engineer for CSEO, Core Services Engineering and Operations. We were formerly known as MSIT. How many people here have heard of MSIT? Yay, okay. How many before today heard of CSEO? Never, right? Like, they're trying to rename us. They've been trying to rename us for 2 years, but we just keep sticking with the MSIT. It's really hard to get away from. The reason why I'm here today is because I led a couple of projects to decentralize our centralized infrastructure monitoring service. And while we did that, we also moved to Azure Monitor. I'm going to get down because I kind of like to interact with you guys, and I want you to know that I spent my very own money on prizes, and that there is something in here that involves a narwhal and bacon. So that's my favorite one. The scenario that I wanted to talk to you about specifically was our leadership team came to give us the message that we needed to move from our infrastructure monitoring service to Azure Monitor. And while doing that, they also wanted us to decentralize. How many people in here, or for a prize, would somebody like to answer this question, has a centralized, currently monitoring system? Right here, okay. Take a prize. And then, you want a sticker? Oh, you got the wolf. All right. So when we did this, this basically came down from our leadership team. They wanted us to move from that model because it was costing us a lot of money. So we had a very traditional IT shop. We had, a website that you went to provision hardware. That server was built by a team that had administrative rights on that server. It would come with a golden stamp, basically version of Windows or Windows and SQL. And then the next thing you know, Azure comes on the scene. And what happened was the company really wanted us to start innovating. And so people were just taking out their American Express cards and buying their Azure subscriptions and started building servers. Well, that was creating this huge gap between the centralized IT team and the people, the DevOps teams who were building out the stuff. Now, we didn't want to discourage them. We really wanted them to innovate. We wanted them to build out these subscriptions and the servers and the services, and that was cool. But guess what? Those servers that they were building in Azure, we weren't admins on them. They didn't have SCOM on them. We didn't have GPO. They weren't joined to the domain. They were just doing whatever it was that they were doing. So and it kind of makes sense. I mean, Microsoft as a company is trying to they're building products competitively, and they were outpacing us in operations. So what we thought we would do two things. One was decentralize the service so that we would drive the workloads from like vendor teams and tier one teams back into our FTEs. And then two would be to move from SCOM to Azure Monitor. So for us, it was a two-part thing. We thought the best way to do this was to create toolkits. So I'm going to show you that in a little bit, the automation that we came up with. And then we wanted to decom our SCOM infrastructure. So for DevOps transformation, this is what it means to us. So on the right side, you see centralized IT. This is probably really common, what everybody has. You have your SCOM infrastructure, your monitoring services, and it's going to a team of people like a tier 1 through 4, and they're doing the configuration of the alerts, they're taking the escalations, probably a vendor team taking like your tier 1, 2, 3, and then maybe you have some full-time people doing like your tier 3 and 4. That's kind of how we were set up. And then if we couldn't resolve the problem, then that's when we went on to the next step, which was escalating to the actual application engineering team. So for us, decentralization basically meant to switch the bottom two. So we have the application engineer up a level, and then my team, manageability platforms, we moved down one. So basically, we're just doing the consulting and the guidance and providing information about alerts. But the engineer is the one who's actually taking the escalation. So you know how you get the same alert every day 100 times, it just keeps getting closed, nobody ever fixes it. You try to tell the engineer that owns the application about it, and they're just like, yeah, but you're the one who's dealing with the ticket, so they don't really care. In the decentralized model, you're kind of fixing that problem because they're getting the alert 100 times, not you. And so they don't want to do that. All of a sudden they realize how hard your life is, and so now they're fixing that problem. And then the other thing that's good about it is that if you get a really high priority alert that goes into a tier 1 team, That tier 1 team doesn't necessarily know that it's an outage or a problem. If you have that alert going directly to the engineering team who built the application, they can respond to it faster. So by having this model, we just see a lot of improvements in the process where you're getting the developer closer to the thing that they actually built so that they're driving those fixes and doing improvements and solving problems quicker than if they were being filtered through a vendor tier 1 through 4 team. I should give away another prize. So who here is using just Azure Monitor? Anyone? Oh, right. Take a prize. Is anybody here just using SCOM? Woo! Prize. Maybe we'll do 2 prizes. Here, will you flip that on? Let me ask you a question. Do you use anything besides SCOM?
Yes and no. I mean, we're using SCOM mainly right now, but we do have some items that are using Azure Monitoring.
Oh.
So we're obviously here because we want to figure out how we can switch from SCOM to OMS.
How many servers do you guys support?
Ooh, roughly, yeah.
How many?
About 400, 500 servers.
400 or 500 servers. So in our decentralization project, we're supporting 30,000. Just for context. So consideration. So when we talk about moving from SCOM to Azure Monitor, these are some of the things that we had to think about. So the first one is the really cool thing about SCOM is that it has management packs. So if you want to monitor SQL, you just get the SQL management pack. You want to monitor Azure, you get the Azure management pack. You go into Azure Monitor, there is no management pack, and you're kind of like, well, what am I supposed to monitor? So that was something that we really had to take into consideration. It's something that made it difficult. We had a lot of legacy alerts in our SCOM infrastructure. Microsoft's network basically is 40 years old. I don't exactly know how long our SCOM infrastructure has been around, maybe, I don't know, 10 or 15 years. So we got 10 or 15 years worth of crappy alerts just sort of sitting out there. So we have to think about, okay, if we're going to transition this stuff, we don't want to transition our garbage, right? Application monitoring is out of scope. My team, the focus is just on infrastructure monitoring. We didn't do application monitoring. We did have a service. I don't know if anybody has something similar. We called it hosted SCOM. So basically, we would build out the infrastructure, install and configure and manage SCOM, and then we would let the application team come in and manage their own alerts on that. So they weren't having to do the SCOM support. We provided that service. So the infrastructure, we were doing the whole thing, alerts and the management of the infrastructure. And hosted SCOM, we were just managing the infrastructure. But for us, for this particular project that we did not take in those application alerts. If they wanted to continue to monitor their application, we asked them to do the move to Azure Monitor also. We wanted to focus on migration, so we weren't doing any improvements. So we knew that there was a lot of new things that we could get out of Azure Monitor, but we were like, hey, we just want to move our existing infrastructure. So and we wanted to just make sure the project stayed scoped, so we wouldn't get all crazy and there would never be an end date. So we just focused on exactly what we had. We wanted to reduce the impact to the application team. So when I say I have a centralized team, we do all the monitoring for you, and then I turn around and say, hey, all you application teams, now you have to do your own monitoring. That's really asking them to add a lot of resources. They have to ramp up on the tooling. They have to figure out what they need to monitor. These people are not necessarily used to doing that kind of monitoring themselves. And a lot of times we have our work planned out, 6 to 12 months in advance. So now I'm saying, hey, I'm adding to your workload. You need to squeeze this in. So there was a lot of people that weren't very excited about that. And then the other thing is that we use an internal ticketing system. We call it ICM. And so there wasn't any built-in thing for like webhooks and stuff in Azure Monitor for our particular ticketing system. So these are the steps that we did for migration. So when we say assess our current environment, we look at, okay, how many alerts do we have on the current instance? So we had about 400 that were active. And then so you take all those alerts and you compare them to your ticketing system. So you say, all right, how many of these alerts actually occurred in the last 6 to 12 months? And I think for everybody that's going to be different on how much time you go back and look at. You want to look at count, but you also want to look at severity. So those two things together are really important, because if you're just looking at count, like I said earlier, you have these weird alerts that are just false alerts, and you're going to get 10 a day, 100 a month, whatever, and they always get closed because the vendor goes in and goes, oh, I couldn't reproduce it, and just closes it. They're getting paid $10 a ticket or whatever, so they're like, just slamming those things out. And then there's other times where you get an alert that maybe caused an outage, but you just got it one time, but you know that it's really critical. So quantity and severity together will help you evaluate your list and then compare that to what you have in Azure Monitor. For another prize, does anybody want to say how many alerts they have in their SCOM instance? Does anybody have an embarrassing number? Well, you already got a prize. I need somebody new. I hope you have an embarrassing number.
Do you want active alerts right now?
Sure, active alerts.
About 2,000.
2,000. Whoa, you should get a prize. So anybody can beat that? Oh, how many do you have?
We average around 500 per day. It's a 2,000 server estate.
Well, excellent.
Oh,
There's bubbles, there's mints, there's all kinds of things in there. All right. So anyway, so that's what we did anyhow, is we took those alerts that we had in our SCOM instance and then compared them across our environment. We ended up only coming out with 15 for infrastructure, and then we had another 15 for SQL. So out of our 400-ish, like I said, this was very cleaned up and a very narrow scope. We're not talking about application necessarily, so just for infrastructure. So then we took all those alerts and we're like, okay, now we have to go figure out how to get them created in Azure. So we had our engineering teams go and start developing those alerts in Azure Monitor, writing out the queries, and getting those alerts created. We also wanted to create automation. So hang on, there's a question.
I just want to ask you, during the tandem time, while operating both of them parallel, which was your productive system?
Which was the what?
Which of the two was your productive system?
Oh, which one was in production? Oh, let me get to that and just, I did skip that. So we designed and created the alerts in Azure, then we ran them in parity. So the ones that we had in Azure Monitor while we were doing the design and stuff, we didn't have them enabled to do alerting yet. So at this point in time, when we were just trying to work it out, we just were still getting all our tickets and stuff from SCOM, but we weren't pulling stuff from Azure Monitor yet. We were just practicing, just seeing how it goes. And so we would say, okay, we got these alerts in SCOM, we're also getting them in Azure Monitor. We have parity, we figured it out, right? We know that we're monitoring the right thing. The create automation and documentation, this was around the toolkit. So we created a toolkit. We actually have this on GitHub if you guys want to use it. And I have it as a link in the deck that you can get offline. And basically we thought we need to make sure that these people who are developers or maybe even PMs who have inherited systems who are not necessarily super technical have a way that they can go start using Azure Monitor more easily than just doing it from scratch, starting from nothing. And then we did a lot of communication and training, so we did brown bags. I think we started this whole journey in January of 2018. That's when we decided that there was enough parity in Azure Monitor for us to switch over. And we shut our SCOM infrastructure off by July. So it was 6 months total, and then another month where we just ran it silently, and then we decommed our infrastructure. So 7 months end to end. But in the beginning, it was talking to leadership teams. It was getting buy-off from those guys. It was making sure that they shared the same vision to do the decentralization and also the Azure adoption. Now, we do have a huge drive for both of those from a leadership point of view. One, for us, probably different than you, is that for us to adopt Azure is really good for Microsoft. They want us using the products. But the other thing that might be more applicable to you, like I said earlier, was that your leadership team wants to see you, maybe bring your stuff off of vendor teams, which are very expensive, and maybe the quality of the work is not as high as if, like I was saying, the developer of the application is actually directly responsible for solving the problems and doing the improvements. So this is a video. I'm going to see if I can play it. This is our toolkit. So this is just an empty. This is just an empty alert screen, just for, and this is my friend Matt wrote this toolkit, the one that you can get off GitHub. So we're just showing it's empty. Here's the PowerShell script. It just has a few parameters. So for this, I just wanted to highlight that, or for this illustration is just basically that if you have someone and you're saying you have to monitor your own stuff now, and you give them SCOM, and say that's your option. If you're a developer or, like I said, a PM who maybe inherited the system or you just don't have any monitoring experience, building out SCOM infrastructure, configuring it, doing all the alerts, dealing with the management packs, deploying the agents, all that stuff, that would be hugely overwhelming. But in this case, I can just give somebody a script and they have monitoring in a couple of minutes. And then there'll still be more things that they have to do, configure the output of the alerts, like do you want it to send an email, do you want it to create a ticket, what is it that you want to do, but at least they already have the alert started, and they have the basic foundational stuff that we recommended. This particular demo, I didn't want it to run too long. It takes a couple minutes just for the whole thing, but we just put like 9 of them in here. But you can see we have a very hybrid environment. So today, when we started, we had 30,000 servers. Today, we only have about 15,000, and those are split about 50-50 between on-prem and Azure. So you'll see that some of these are these are still hardware alerts. And this particular video is about a year old, so we've added a few new ones since then. But it's just really super easy to get somebody started, just to give them this toolkit. And this is the difference between having Azure Monitor and having SCOM. Build out infrastructure, have a SCOM, SME, all this stuff, versus I give you a script and now you have 9 alerts. And this was real time. That wasn't cheating. I mean, that really was that simple. And so this toolkit that we have, we give it to people, and they're always saying things like, oh, can I add to it? Can I take stuff? Sure, do whatever you want. Like, it's totally open source for us internally and externally. If you have your own requirements and you're just trying to make it easier for people to adopt, you can edit those alerts in. You can have a dev environment, get that all created, and then just hand out your toolkit. We created a lot of documentation with this too, just to make it easier. We did a lot of training, like I said, the brown bags and the one-on-ones. So our next steps, we're doing, definitely we're working on improving the toolkit. When we first did it, metric alerts weren't around at that time. So now we're just focusing on getting our log alerts moved over to metric alerts. We're doing more tuning. We do take feedback from external customers, which is really weird because we're, like I said, an internal operations team. So we don't necessarily have customer interactions. Like this, like we do this or we do showcases, but having the toolkit out on GitHub and people make comments, we've even had people check in fixes for it, and we're just like, oh my God, somebody's working with us. So it's been fun. And then we're going to look into more automated remediation. This summarized learnings, so mapping out your people when you first go to do a bigger project and you're trying to get a lot of people to adopt, you kind of want to know your organizational audience. So you might have people on your own team who are super excited about adopting, they're really into it, they're piloting, they're doing previews. Do you have a question? Okay. But then you also have people who are very, very hard to get them to accept any kind of new changes. Let's have a question back here.
So how do you achieve the hardware monitoring with this toolkit solution? Like suppose if you have HP servers or Dell servers or Lenovo servers, so how do you achieve that? So do you want to write each and every alert in the toolkit? Whenever some new alerts you want to define, we need to update the toolkit.
Yeah.
So we need to grab the event ID information and the source information, everything you need to update in the toolkit?
Yeah. Well, so there's also, you guys have probably used VM Insights, right? VM Insights. So that'll give you a lot of information about servers. Once you have the Azure monitoring agent on your server, whether it's on-prem or in Azure, you can do that. And yes, if you have specific scenarios that are not generic, that are just something that's covered by what comes in, let's say, metric alerts inside Azure Monitor, then you're going to have to be specific about using your event IDs to capture those. So once you kind of, maybe I should wait just 1 minute. Let me just finish this one slide just so that it's not too weird. So mapping out your people, I think everybody gets that, just knowing who your organization is, who can you get to do early adoption, who's going to be your ally, and then also who's going to be your hard parts, like who's going to fight you on this, and those are the other people that you need to kind of think through. Making sure you have leadership support, because it's for us, it's such a big change. If you don't have leadership vision, you're not going to make very much progress, because people are going to be like, why are you asking me for resources? Why do you want me to do this? I don't have time for this. You should be doing it, not me. I just won't monitor then. I mean, that's, you actually do get that kind of response. Establish timelines with milestones. If you don't have a target for people to hit, then it's just an open-ended question, and you might not get the kind of adoption that you're really looking for. And then I think tools are not the hard part. I think the hard part is getting the leadership support. It's the communication. It's getting people bought in, having them adopt. that's definitely the experience that I've had, especially at Microsoft, where we have a lot of people who are really excited about technology and they have a lot of passion. And that's fine, but then you need someone who can kind of lead and land that vision, and then you need to get the people who don't necessarily have the passion for technology to get on board with you too. So I think that that's really where the challenges are. I have another Ignite session tomorrow. It's a lot like this one. We just talk more about the people problems. And I also, in this deck, if you want to come onto the website and download it, you can get these links to some other papers and webinars and stuff that my team has worked on. We have a booth over here, number 27, if you want to come talk to someone from CSEO. We're not a product group. We're just here to share our experiences. So if you just want to ask us questions about what we did, there's a lot of people from different groups over there. I'll be over there this morning. Attend our sessions. Kurt Delbenny wrote this actually really amazing digital transformation white paper. I hate to admit this. I don't usually read that kind of stuff, but I read this one and I really enjoyed it. He did a good job. He's a smart guy. And please evaluate this session. Be nice. No prize. There's the session information, and that's it. So thanks for coming. If you want to talk, I'll be over here. I still have more prizes if you want to come, first serve.